Jake Callahan believed in simple things, hard work, honest living, and the quiet beauty of the land he called home. His farm, stretching across the outskirts of Greenfield Heights, had been in his family for 3 generations. It was more than just property, it was a legacy, a piece of history written in every sun-worn fence post and every groove of the old red barn. Every morning, before the world had fully shaken off sleep, he sat on his porch with a steaming mug of coffee, listening to the slow awakening of his land. The rustle of the breeze through the oak trees, the distant mooing of his cows, and the rhythmic crow of his rooster, Duke, were the only alarm clock he needed. Life was steady, predictable, just the way he liked it. That peace shattered the moment Evelyn Harper set foot on his land. He spotted her before she reached the porch, marching down his gravel driveway in her crisp beige pantsuit and designer heels, her expression a perfect blend of forced politeness and thinly veiled irritation. She carried a clipboard like a scepter, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against the surface as she walked. Jake didn't need an introduction. Everyone in Greenfield Heights knew Evelyn Harper, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association. She ran the HOA like a tyrant, dictating everything from mailbox styles to the height of backyard hedges. If a blade of grass grew out of line, Evelyn was the first to point it out. Jake leaned back in his rocking chair, taking a slow sip of coffee as she approached. He had a feeling this wasn't a social visit. "Good morning," she greeted, her voice clipped and professional, like a customer service rep forcing a smile. "You must be Mr. Callahan." "That's me," Jake replied, setting his mug down on the worn wood of the porch railing. "And you are?" "Evelyn Harper," she said with a tight-lipped smile, straightening her posture as if preparing for a speech. "President of the Greenfield Heights Homeowners Association." Jake's brow lifted. "Didn't realize I had anything to do with your HOA." "Well," she said, drawing out the word, "technically, you don't. But your property is adjacent to our community, and as I'm sure you understand, property values are a delicate thing." Jake exhaled slowly, already seeing where this was headed. "We've received multiple complaints," Evelyn continued, her tone dripping with rehearsed authority. "Residents have expressed concerns about, well, the overall aesthetic impact of your farm." He crossed his arms. "Aesthetic impact?" She gestured toward the barn. "For starters, the red color is a bit loud. We prefer neutral tones in Greenfield Heights. A fresh coat of beige or gray would blend much better with the neighborhood's character." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "This barn's been red since my grandfather built it. Ain't changing now." Evelyn's smile tightened. "I see. Then there's the matter of your rooster. What about him? Some of our residents have mentioned being woken up before sunrise. It's quite disruptive." Jake fought back a smirk. "It's a rooster, ma'am. That's what they do." "Yes, well," she said, clearly unimpressed with his reasoning, "we have noise ordinances in place, and—" Jake held up a hand. "I'm not in your HOA, so your ordinances don't mean a damn thing to me." Her eyes flashed with irritation, but she kept her composure. "Mr. Callahan, I understand change can be difficult, but this is really in everyone's best interest. I'd hate for this to become a more complicated issue." Jake pushed himself up from his chair, stretching his arms. "Well, I appreciate you stopping by, Miss Harper, but I don't answer to your rules. My barn stays red, my rooster stays loud, and my farm stays just the way it is." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll see about that," she muttered before turning sharply on her heel and marching back to her car. Jake watched her go, shaking his head. He'd dealt with stubborn animals before, but something told him Evelyn Harper was going to be a whole different kind of problem. The first letter arrived 2 days after Evelyn Harper's unwelcome visit. Jake Callahan found it folded neatly in his mailbox, the Greenfield Heights HOA logo stamped smugly in the top left corner. He tore it open right there on his porch, skimming the official-sounding jargon until his eyes landed on the heart of it: violations. Unauthorized exterior color. Excessive noise pollution. Unkempt landscaping. Each charge was more ridiculous than the last. His barn, a supposed visual disruption, needed to be repainted in an HOA-approved neutral shade. His rooster was disturbing the peace and needed to be silenced. Even the natural wildflowers growing along his fence line were deemed unsightly and a threat to property values. Jake let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head as he folded the letter and shoved it in his back pocket. If Evelyn thought a few fancy words on HOA letterhead would make him fall in line, she had another thing coming. He wasn't part of their little kingdom, and he sure as hell wasn't about to bow to their rules. He crumpled the notice and tossed it into the fire pit next to his porch. That should have been the end of it. But Evelyn wasn't the type to take no for an answer. By the end of the week, county inspectors started showing up at his farm, one after another. A zoning officer arrived first, clipboard in hand, claiming they had received an anonymous complaint about unregulated livestock practices. When that led to nothing, a health inspector showed up, citing concerns over possible waste runoff contaminating the groundwater. Then came a noise compliance officer, scratching his head as he tried to figure out how to regulate a rooster's morning routine. Each visit ended the same way, with the officials leaving empty-handed and shaking their heads in exasperation. Jake had a strong suspicion about the so-called anonymous complaints, but it wasn't until he spotted Evelyn standing at the edge of his property, watching with her arms folded as a county vehicle pulled away, that he knew for sure. She didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. The final straw came when Jake was out in the fields, repairing a section of fencing that had taken a beating in last week's storm. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and was about to grab another wooden plank when the unmistakable growl of a chainsaw cut through the afternoon air. He turned toward the sound, his gut twisting. It was coming from the side of his property that bordered Greenfield Heights. He strode toward the noise, his boots kicking up dust, and what he saw made his blood run hot. A team of workers was erecting a massive steel gray fence, an ugly, 10-foot monstrosity that stretched along his property line like a scar. Supervising the work, clipboard in hand, was none other than Evelyn Harper. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jake barked as he reached the boundary. Evelyn turned, her face the picture of false surprise. "Mr. Callahan, what a coincidence seeing you here." Jake gestured toward the fence. "This is my land, Evelyn. You have no right to build here." She flipped through a few pages on her clipboard with theatrical patience. "Actually, that's debatable. We've been reviewing older property surveys, and it appears the original boundary lines were drawn incorrectly. Since your land borders Greenfield Heights, we believe it's in the community's best interest to make necessary adjustments." Jake stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. "You believe, huh? So, until that's officially clarified, you figured you'd just take it upon yourself to build on my property?" Evelyn's smile never wavered. "Exactly." Jake turned his attention to the workers. "You boys got a permit for this?" One of them hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. HOA told us they had all the approvals." "They don't," Jake said flatly, crossing his arms. "And if you don't pack up and leave in the next 5 minutes, you'll be trespassing, which means I'll be calling the sheriff." The workers exchanged uneasy glances. They weren't about to risk legal trouble over an overzealous HOA president. One by one, they began gathering their equipment, the chainsaw going silent as it was powered down. Evelyn's expression twitched, a flicker of irritation breaking through her polished mask. "You can't just order them to leave," she snapped. Jake pulled out his phone and held it up. "Then let's make it official and have the county sort it out." Evelyn's confidence faltered. She glanced toward the workers, who were already loading their tools into their trucks, and then back at Jake. Her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. "Fine," she hissed, before spinning on her heel and stalking off toward her car. Jake watched her go, shaking his head in disbelief. He had dealt with stubborn animals before, but Evelyn Harper was proving to be a whole different kind of beast. The next morning, another envelope was waiting in his mailbox, slipped in under the cover of darkness. Jake ripped it open and read the latest round of accusations. It was a list of new violations, this time escalating to potential legal threats. Unauthorized livestock. Unapproved fencing. Excessive environmental disturbances. And at the very bottom, in bold letters, cease and desist all non-compliant activities within 7 days or face legal action. Jake laughed out loud. A deep, incredulous, belly-shaking laugh. So, that's how she wanted to play it? Fine. She wanted a war. She was about to get one. The next few days brought an uneasy quiet, but Jake Callahan knew better than to think Evelyn Harper had given up. He could feel it in the air, that creeping sense of something brewing just beyond his sight. And sure enough, the next attack came, not in the form of another letter or another team of county inspectors, but something far more insidious. It started with a news crew. Jake had just finished his morning chores when he saw a white van pull up to the edge of his property, the side emblazoned with the logo of Channel 6 local news. A reporter, a young woman with carefully styled hair and a microphone in hand, stepped out, followed closely by a cameraman adjusting his lens. Jake barely had time to register what was happening before she was already in full broadcast mode, standing in front of the camera, speaking with dramatic urgency. The controversy surrounding the Callahan farm continues, with local residents expressing growing concerns about its impact on property values and community safety. Complaints of excessive noise, foul odors, and unregulated livestock have left homeowners frustrated, and the Greenfield Heights HOA is calling for action. Jake's stomach twisted as he watched the segment unfold in real time. They panned to carefully selected shots of his farm, the barn, zoomed in at an angle that made it look far more rundown than it really was, a shot of the chicken coop with a dramatic overlay of the word unsanitary, in bold red letters. Then came the interviews. A woman, a supposed neighbor, stood in front of a perfectly manicured lawn, shaking her head in disapproval. "It's just awful," she sighed. "We wake up to that rooster at the crack of dawn, the smell drifts into our yards, it's unbearable. We just want to live in a peaceful community." Another man, looking every bit the part of an annoyed suburbanite, added, "People moved here for a certain lifestyle. We pay our HOA dues for a reason. If I wanted to live next to a farm, I would have moved to the country." Jake clenched his jaw. He recognized neither of these people. In fact, their houses weren't anywhere near his property. It was all orchestrated. A staged hit piece designed to make him look like some inconsiderate slob dragging down the whole neighborhood. When the reporter finally turned to him, shoving a microphone in his direction, Jake was already on edge. "Mr. Callahan, how do you respond to accusations that your farm is an environmental hazard and a disruption to the Greenfield Heights community?" Jake exhaled sharply, forcing himself to keep his temper in check. "I respond by saying it's all bull. My farm has been here for generations. I don't answer to an HOA I was never a part of, and I sure as hell don't take kindly to people spreading lies about me." The cameraman zoomed in just as he said it. Later that night, when the segment aired, that's all they showed, the entire interview cut down to a single soundbite, making Jake look aggressive and dismissive. The rest of the report painted him as a stubborn recluse, a troublemaker, a problem. Evelyn had turned the court of public opinion against him, and she wasn't done yet. The next day, a team of animal welfare officers arrived at his gate. "Anonymous tip," one of them explained, flipping through a stack of paperwork. "Claims of livestock neglect. We need to do a welfare check." Jake felt a fresh surge of anger. He had no doubt who the so-called tip had come from. He led the officers around the property, showing them the healthy, well-fed animals, the clean pens, the stocked food supplies, everything in perfect order. And yet, as the inspection wrapped up, one of the officers frowned at the papers in his hands. "We received these photos as evidence," he said, turning the stack toward Jake. The images showed malnourished, sickly animals standing in filth, except they weren't his animals. The backgrounds didn't match his farm. "Where the hell did these come from?" Jake demanded. "We don't know," the officer admitted. "But the complaint was filed with these as proof." Jake didn't need to guess. Evelyn had faked evidence. "If your farm checks out," the officer continued, "we won't take action, but, given the nature of the complaints, we may have to come back for further investigation." Jake barely restrained himself from punching the nearest fence post. Further investigation? How many more complaints would Evelyn manufacture? How many more agencies would she send after him? He wasn't just dealing with an annoying HOA anymore. She was actively trying to ruin his life. And she still wasn't done. Later that night, long after the sun had set, Jake was inside finishing up some paperwork when he heard something outside, ****, a loud crack, the sound of splintering wood, ****, his gut clenched. That wasn't an animal. Grabbing his shotgun, he made his way toward the sound, his boots crunching against the gravel as he neared the boundary of his property. What he saw made his blood boil. His fence, ***, broken down in sections, slashed clean through in others, ***, piles of hay torn apart and scattered. His irrigation system, the hoses sliced open and spilling water uselessly into the dirt. He moved toward one of the fence posts, inspecting the damage, when a flicker of movement caught his eye. A man, ***, dressed in dark clothing, mid-swing with a crowbar, trying to take out another section of fence, ***. Jake didn't hesitate. "Hey," he roared, stepping forward. The man froze, eyes wide, before turning on his heel and bolting into the night. Jake took off after him, chasing him toward the tree line, but the intruder was fast. Within moments, he was gone. Fury burned in Jake's chest as he walked back to the wreckage. This wasn't random vandalism. This was deliberate, ***. And he had a damn good idea who was behind it. The next morning, as he reviewed his security footage, his suspicions were confirmed. The cameras had caught 3 men sneaking onto his property, smashing equipment, tearing down fences. And just before the footage cut out, because, of course, they had disabled a few of the cameras, one of them spoke, clear as day ***. Miss Harper will be happy with this. Jake sat back in his chair, exhaling sharply. Enough was enough. Evelyn had tried to push him out with legal loopholes, false complaints, and public smear campaigns. Now she was sending people to sabotage his farm. She wanted war? Fine. She was about to get one. Jake Callahan had spent his whole life working the land, weathering storms, droughts, and long, backbreaking days under the sun. But nothing, nothing had tested his patience quite like Evelyn Harper. She had sent county inspectors, manipulated the media, filed false reports, and even resorted to outright vandalism to force him off his own land. But the moment she escalated to hiring thugs to destroy his farm, she crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. It was time to go on the offensive. At sunrise, Jake drove straight to his lawyer's office in town. He slapped the stack of evidence on the desk, security footage, the bogus HOA letters, witness statements, even the falsified animal cruelty complaints. "I want a cease and desist filed against Evelyn Harper and the Greenfield Heights HOA for harassment, defamation, and trespassing," he said, his voice like steel. His lawyer, an older man who had seen plenty of small-town feuds, flipped through the papers, let out a low whistle, and nodded. "We'll hit them where it hurts." With the legal groundwork in motion, Jake turned to the court of public opinion. If Evelyn wanted to use the media against him, he'd return the favor. He reached out to an independent journalist, one who wasn't cozy with the HOA, and provided the real story, complete with uncut footage of the vandals mentioning Evelyn's name, the county reports clearing his farm of wrongdoing, and evidence of her trying to claim his land illegally. 2 days later, the exposé hit the airwaves. "Farmer fights back against corrupt HOA" flashed across the screen, and the town exploded with outrage, the footage of Jake's farm being sabotaged, the emails proving Evelyn had falsified complaints, and the revelation that she had tried to annex land that didn't belong to her painted her as nothing short of a villain. The public turned violently against her. But the final nail in her coffin came from an unexpected source, *** Greg Dawson, a retired veteran and longtime Greenfield Heights resident, ***. Greg, who had once supported the HOA, had started digging through old records when Jake's case gained attention. What he found was pure gold. At Jake's farm, he handed over a manila folder, a slow grin spreading across his face. "You're gonna love this," he said. Inside were internal HOA emails, ones Evelyn had never meant for public eyes. The emails detailed a plan to sell Jake's land to developers for a luxury golf course. Even worse, there was an email where she proposed a special assessment fee, ***, forcing every homeowner in Greenfield Heights to pay extra HOA dues to cover the legal battle against Jake, ***. In short, Evelyn had been planning to fund her personal war using money from the very people who had trusted her leadership. Jake wasted no time handing the file to the county commissioner. Within hours, an official investigation was opened into the HOA's finances. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the community center was packed. People who had once blindly supported Evelyn now saw her for what she was, a power-hungry tyrant willing to throw them all under the bus for her own agenda. Evelyn, still clinging to the illusion of control, stood at the podium, straightening her blazer as if that would restore her authority. "We need to remain calm and focus on what's best for Greenfield Heights," she started, but she never got the chance to finish. Greg stood up, holding up the folder of emails. "What's best for Greenfield Heights? That's rich, coming from someone who was about to charge all of us extra just so she could sue Jake Callahan." A wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Evelyn's face drained of color. That's a gross misrepresentation," she stammered, but Richard Langford, the HOA president, had already taken the papers from Greg. His frown deepened as he read. "Evelyn, what the hell is this?" Jake leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, watching her empire crumble in real time. "You lied to us," another resident shouted. "You were trying to sell his land that doesn't even belong to the HOA. More voices joined in. The same people who had once supported Evelyn were now calling for her resignation. Evelyn's composure snapped. "You think you can run this neighborhood without me?" she shrieked, her perfectly polished veneer cracking under the weight of her unraveling power. "I built this HOA. I made this community what it is." Richard, who had always been mild-mannered, let out a sigh and looked her dead in the eye. "And now you've destroyed it." The vote was cast right then and there. Unanimous. Evelyn Harper was officially removed from the HOA. She stood frozen for a moment, as if refusing to believe what had just happened. Then, without another word, she stormed out of the building, shoving past the crowd as she went. Jake followed her out the doors, watching as she stomped toward her car. Before she got in, she turned to glare at him, hatred burning in her eyes. "You think you've won?" she hissed. Jake smiled. "No, Evelyn. I know I have." She sped off, tires screeching against the pavement. By the next morning, a "for sale" sign stood in front of her house. Within the week, Evelyn Harper was gone from Greenfield Heights. But Jake wasn't done celebrating just yet. That same afternoon, he had a custom sign installed right at the edge of his property, facing the neighborhood. "Welcome to River Farm, no HOA. No Karens. No problem, ***. People loved it, it became a town landmark, folks stopped to take pictures with it. The local diner even put up a framed copy inside. And just like that, life in Greenfield Heights changed overnight. Without Evelyn breathing down their necks, residents tore down their uniform white fences, planted colorful gardens, let their kids play outside without fear of fines. Some of the former HOA enforcers even became regulars at Jake's farmers market, shaking their heads at how they had ever let Evelyn control their lives. Jake, for his part, was happy to return to his normal routine. Sitting on his porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over his land, he finally had what he'd been fighting for all along, peace, And just when he thought things couldn't get any sweeter, news trickled down a few weeks later, Evelyn Harper had moved into another HOA-controlled neighborhood, Except this time, she wasn't in charge. The new HOA president made her life a living hell. She got fined for her grass being half an inch too tall. She got a notice for her trash bins being left out 2 minutes too long. She was written up for unauthorized garden decorations. And the best part? When she tried to get on the HOA board, they rejected her outright. Jake chuckled when he heard. Poetic justice. He leaned back in his chair, tipping his hat down over his eyes as Duke the rooster let out a loud, unapologetic crow. This time, there wasn't a single complaint. The days following Evelyn Harper's removal from power were a breath of fresh air for Greenfield Heights. The oppressive atmosphere that had once hung over the neighborhood like a cloud was gone. People who had been living in fear of the HOA's countless rules began to breathe a little easier. Lawns that had been clipped to perfection now sported wildflowers. Kids who had been restricted to playing indoors found freedom in the streets. And best of all, Jake Callahan's farm, the symbol of resistance, became a beacon of hope. His giant sign, proudly declaring, "Welcome to River Farm, NOHOA. No Karens. No problem," stood tall at the edge of his property, a reminder to everyone that they didn't have to bend to the whims of a power-hungry leader. The farmers' market Jake had started on a whim quickly became a weekly event, drawing in crowds from all over the county. People from neighboring towns who had heard about the infamous battle between Jake and the HOA came to visit, buying fresh produce, homemade jams, and locally grown vegetables. It wasn't just about the food, it was about something more. It was about community, about taking a stand and saying, enough is enough. Even some former members of the HOA stopped by, bringing gifts of baked goods as a sort of apology for their part in the whole mess. And then there was Evelyn. After her humiliating defeat, she moved to another community, convinced she could start fresh. But she quickly realized she had traded one tyrannical HOA for another. The new neighborhood had a president just as strict as she had been, fining her for the most trivial things, grass that was half an inch too tall, trash bins left out for a few extra minutes, and even her garden gnome collection being deemed an eyesore. Evelyn tried to fight back, just as she had before, but the tables had turned. The new HOA quickly shot her down, rejecting her efforts to join the board. It didn't take long for her to realize she wasn't the one in charge anymore. Within weeks, her house was listed for sale again. Jake, on the other hand, enjoyed his newfound peace. As he sat on his porch, sipping his coffee, watching the sunrise, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had stood his ground, fought back against a system that was set up to crush him, and in the end, he won. The peace that had returned to Greenfield Heights was more than just the absence of Evelyn Harper. It was a symbol of what could happen when people came together to fight against unfair rules. And as Jake watched the rooster crowing in the distance, a thought lingered in the back of his mind. Would the people of Greenfield Heights ever forget the lessons learned during this battle? Would they be able to resist the next time someone like Evelyn tried to push them around? Or would they let complacency creep back in, only to find themselves fighting the same fight once more? Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.